And the Sea of Galilee, it was more than just a body of water for Jesus. It was a place he often went. He walked along its shores. He taught the crowds from a boat on its gentle waves. The sea was a constant presence in his earthly ministry, a familiar friend. Many of his chosen disciples were fishermen. They knew this sea like the back of their hands. They understood its moods, its dangers, and its bounty. It was their workplace, their livelihood, their everyday reality. This connection to the sea was not accidental. It was part of God's perfect plan. The sea held great importance in the daily lives of the people. It provided food. It offered pathways for travel and trade. For men like Peter, Andrew, James, and John, the sea was their office. They had spent countless hours on its waters, casting nets and hauling in fish. They had seen its calm beauty and experienced its sudden fury. They respected the sea. They depended on it. Jesus chose these men of the sea, to be his closest followers. He knew their hearts, their courage, and their simple faith. He would use their understanding of the sea to teach them and us profound truths. Imagine Jesus sitting in a boat, the water lapping gently against its sides. He speaks to the people gathered on the shore. His voice carries over the water. The setting itself is a sermon. The vastness of the sea, the depth of its waters, all point to something bigger. Jesus used these familiar elements to explain unfamiliar heavenly concepts. He spoke of nets and fish, of storms and calm. His parables often drew from the world his listeners knew best. This made his teachings powerful and easy to remember. The sea was not just a location, it was a classroom for divine lessons. So this sea, this large lake, became a significant stage for some of God's most amazing displays of power. It was here that Jesus would show his authority, not just over sickness or sin, but over the very forces of nature. The wind and the waves would obey him. The water itself would support him. These events were not random. They were carefully chosen moments. They were designed to reveal who Jesus truly was. They were meant to build the faith of his disciples and all who would hear these stories. The sea was ready for miracles. One evening, Jesus and his disciples set out in a boat. They were crossing the Sea of Galilee. Jesus, perhaps weary from a long day of teaching and healing, went to the stern. He lay down and fell asleep. Soon a furious storm swept down on the lake. This was no ordinary squall. The wind howled fiercely, whipping the water into great waves. The waves crashed over the sides of the small fishing boat. It began to fill with water. The disciples, many of them seasoned fishermen, knew they were in serious trouble. They had faced storms before, but this was different. Fear gripped their hearts. These strong men were terrified. The sky was dark. The boat was tossed about like a toy. They fought against the storm with all their might, but it was no use. The situation seemed hopeless. They felt the cold spray of the water and the violent rocking of the boat. They looked at each other, their faces pale with fear. They truly believed they were about to drown. In their panic, they remembered Jesus. How could he sleep through such a terrifying tempest? Their fear turned into a desperate plea. They stumbled towards Jesus, who was still asleep. They woke him, their voices filled with urgency and perhaps a hint of accusation. "Teacher," they cried out, "don't you care if we drown?" Their words revealed their deep distress. They felt abandoned in the face of overwhelming danger. They questioned if their master even noticed their plight. It was a cry from the heart, a raw expression of human fear when faced with the untamed power of nature. They needed help, and they needed it immediately. They looked to Jesus as their only hope. Jesus opened his eyes. He saw their fear. He heard their desperate cries. He got up. He looked at the raging storm. Then, with a calm authority that stilled even the disciples' racing hearts, he spoke to the wind. He rebuked the waves. "Quiet!" he commanded. "Be still!" And instantly the wind died down. The raging waters became completely calm. A great peace settled over the sea. The disciples were stunned into silence. They looked at Jesus, then at the now placid water. They were filled with awe. "Who is this?" they whispered to each other. "Even the wind and the waves obey him." On another occasion, a similar scene unfolded, but with a different, astonishing twist. Jesus had sent his disciples ahead of him in a boat to cross the lake. He had gone up on a mountainside by himself to pray. As evening fell, the boat was already a considerable distance from land. A strong wind began to blow against them, and the waves grew rough. The disciples were straining at the oars, making slow and difficult progress. It was dark, and they were alone, battling the elements. They were tired and likely anxious about the journey. Sometime during the darkest part of the night, between 3 and 6 in the morning, they saw something unbelievable. A figure was approaching their boat, walking on the surface of the water. In the dim light and stormy conditions, they couldn't make out who it was. Their hearts pounded with fear. They thought it was a ghost. The sight was terrifying, unnatural. It added a new layer of dread to their already difficult situation. They cried out in terror, their voices lost in the sound of the wind and waves. They were completely unprepared for such a sight. But then, a familiar voice cut through their fear. "Take courage," Jesus called out to them. "It is I. Don't be afraid." His words brought immediate reassurance. It was their master. Peter, ever impulsive and full of bold faith, responded. "Lord, if it's you," Peter replied, "tell me to come to you on the water." He wanted proof, yes, but he also wanted to share in this incredible moment, to be close to Jesus even in the midst of the storm. It was a daring request, born out of a mixture of awe and a desire for a deeper experience of faith. "Come," Jesus said simply, and Peter did something extraordinary. He got down out of the boat, he set his foot upon the water, and he walked. He actually walked on the water, moving towards Jesus. For a few moments, Peter shared in his Lord's miracle, but then he took his eyes off Jesus. He looked around at the strong wind and the high waves. Fear surged through him again. Doubt crept in, and as his faith wavered, he began to sink. "Lord, save me," he cried. Immediately, Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. "You of little faith," Jesus said gently, "why did you doubt?" These incredible miracles at sea were profound demonstrations of Jesus' divine power. Calming a raging storm with a mere command showed his authority over the natural world. Walking on the turbulent waters defied the very laws of physics. These were not just impressive feats. They were revelations. They revealed that Jesus was no ordinary teacher or prophet. He was someone with power that belonged to God alone. The sea, so often a symbol of chaos and untamable power, became a canvas upon which Jesus painted clear pictures of his divine identity and his loving care. For the disciples who witnessed these events firsthand, the impact was immense. Their fear, which was very real, transformed into profound awe and wonder. They had seen Jesus heal the sick and cast out demons, but seeing him control the wind and the waves, seeing him walk on water, took their understanding to a completely new level. These experiences stretched their faith. They challenged their perceptions of what was possible. Each miracle chipped away at their doubts and built a stronger foundation for their belief in him as the Son of God, the Messiah they had been waiting for. It is important to understand that these miracles were not performed simply for show. They were not magic tricks designed to entertain or amaze senselessly. Each act was a powerful living parable. The calming of the storm taught about finding peace in Jesus amidst life's chaos. Peter's walk and his subsequent sinking taught a vital lesson about the importance of keeping one's focus on Jesus, especially when the storms of doubt and fear arise. These were teachable moments, rich with spiritual significance, intended to deepen the disciples' trust and understanding of their master and his mission. Ultimately, these miraculous sea tales have echoed through centuries, continuing to inspire and strengthen faith. They remind us that the one who commanded the storm and walked on water is still with us. He understands our fears. He knows the storms we face in our own lives. These stories are an invitation to trust him, to fix our eyes on him when we feel like we are sinking. They serve as anchors for our belief, assuring us that, with Jesus, the impossible can become possible. The wildest waves of life can be stilled by his presence and his powerful, loving word.